Well, one of the most obvious ways is to show how people like it and show the growth numbers. You know, many e-learning institutions around the world are having growth of 10, 15, 20% every year and have for the last 8 or 9 years. So I think the consumer acceptance, the student acceptance of e-learning, I think is high. And I think it's because e-learning is so much more accessible, you can time shift it and you can place shift it, that it becomes, as it improves in quality, it becomes more compelling for students to use it. So I think you know, that the awareness, the acceptance will be driven and is driven by learners who need the kind of flexibility from it. And the second thing I think is what the eLearn Center does is one of its main functions, and that is to do research, to sort of show its viability, and not just in comparison to face-to-face classes, but how does e-learning with video compare to e-learning with computer-assisted instruction or with online simulations. And so to get beyond just a simple comparison of one versus the other, but what kind of activities in e-learning really make a difference. I think we need to do that research, we need to make that research public. And I guess the final way is to really you know, use the networks, use the emerging and the e-learning tools, the Web 2.0 tools, the blogs. As employees of this institution, we almost have a responsibility to maintain a blog, even though we are always busy, and to, you know, to filter information for each other and be net connected and actually use the technologies ourselves in our personal lives. Because I think people, they need that example, especially from, you know, where everyone's tired of e-learning experts talking about how it's good for other people, but they don't use it themselves, and I think that's a problem.
I think the question is a little bit put in a problematic way, because I once wrote an article that is called E-learning and distance education, not the same thing. And e-learning is not possessed only by distance teaching universities. The fact is that currently you have over 17 million students all over the world studying through distance education methods. 50% of these 17 million distant students study through campus-based universities, traditional universities. So many distance students are right now enrolled in traditional universities. So it's not as though e-learning is possessed by open universities. In your case, the UOC is a very special case, which you were established from the very start as an online university. But this is not the case in the Open University of Britain, not in the Open University of Israel, not in the Dutch Open University, not in UNED even in Spain. So in a way, this is not the case. So it's not as though we are offering e-learning and other universities do not understand. But what is happening is that there is a problem of illiteracy, computer illiteracy, ICT illiteracy, call it whatever you want, both among students and among teachers. Still, most students in open universities and in campus-based universities and professors in open universities and campus-based universities do not know how to utilize and maximize the potential and efficient use of the technologies. So in a way, we are doing a lot of things, including research and activities done in this eLearn Center, in order to understand it. But I think that digital technologies actually entered all the spheres of our life. I wrote 2 years ago, I published a book which is called Digital Technologies in Higher Education, Sweeping Expectation and Actual Effects, and try to explain why there is a huge gap between the sweeping expectation about the potential use of technologies and what's happening in reality. And there is still a long way to go to understand what we do with it. Part of the problem, and this is the last thing I will say about this question, part of the problem is that the problems that the technology should solve are not clear. It's exactly with the famous saying technology is the answer, but what are the questions? So we have to formulate the questions very carefully, and it's not clear yet what technology should do.
I think that most people think that e-learning is about dispensing information. And so a key message is to emphasize that e-learning is about a particular way of teaching and learning. It's not mostly about technology, it's more about pedagogy. And the pedagogy includes supporting sense-making and relationships, not just imparting information.
First, e-learning is already everywhere, especially since the advent of cheap smartphones. So, understanding and accepting e-learning is, in my opinion, just a matter of time. I think that we all should be aware that the current way educational relationships are structured is more a product of tradition, faculty, economy, and managerial conveniences than due to the intrinsic requirements of learning and educating. So we must be open to change, even to changing very old traditions of schooling, higher education, and even corporate learning levels. E-learning offers quite new ways of structuring educational relationships, as educational relationships that are mediated by interactive and communication technologies. I think that in the near future, these nowadays emerging and non-consolidated forms of structuring education will be seen as absolutely natural. I guess that introducing the e-learning experience through some distance courses in secondary education, for instance, would help to consolidate e-learning in society. I would like to add that in Catalonia, some steps are being taken in this direction.
Because people have very different ideas of what you mean when you say e-learning, I never use it myself in my own conversation, my own work. I usually say technology support for learning-related activities. And these activities can relate to content access, but they can also relate to interaction, to communication, and to new forms of learning activities. For example, those in which user-generated ideas and content become part of the learning resources for other students. So technology support for learning, to me, is a term it's still a term people can picture in different ways, but it's less likely, I think, to have a very narrow interpretation than the term e-learning may have.